Internet culture is a fascinating pool of creativity and raw talent. And lately, Hollywood has been dipping their toes into the waters of that pool, with movies like Iron Lung, Bring Her Back, Exit 8, and Five Nights at Freddy's. Hollywood, and more importantly the general public, are finally starting to recognize smaller, creative-driven stories and not overblown studio content. I'm not entirely certain, but the next big thing to dethrone superhero movies may just be this new fascination with internet-driven IP. If you want further proof, well then look no further than the upcoming Backrooms movie. The story of falling into endless extra-dimensional rooms, where what looks like glitches and leftovers of our own dimension are stored in this hauntingly yellow, liminal space while nightmarish creatures roam the hallways. The kind of story that can only be thought of by a community of mad thinkers. In May of 2019, an anonymous user on 4chan posted a photo of an empty yellow room with the caption, "Post disquieting images that just feel off." The very next day, another anonymous user replied with the following, "If you're not careful, and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent light at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you." And with that, the Backrooms were born. Unfortunately, we don't know the names of the anonymous users. The original 2019 poster of the photo has never been identified, while the user who replied with the details has since been identified to be a user who goes by the name Black August. Although as far as I'm aware, it hasn't been confirmed 100% at this point, so we don't know for sure. The original Backrooms have only the one level, or level 0, the yellow endless hallways and rooms. There are no monsters, so to speak, but the idea that something can be lurking down there with you, always watching and waiting. It's pure psychological horror at its rawest form. Within a few days though, the story of the Backrooms began to circulate through the internet forums, with bits and pieces of lore being added on. Levels 1 and 2 were added to 4chan soon after by a user, as well as some new additions to level 0, like every so often coming into contact with a humanoid-like being. This seems to be the version of the Backrooms that people find to be at its apex. At least what I can find here on the internet. In doing some research on this topic, there's kind of a split between the community about the preference of levels. You're either team 3 levels or team lots of levels, as there really doesn't seem to be a set number. Whichever style of lore you prefer, it doesn't really matter. Solely in the context of this video though, not general opinion wise. And that's because in the upcoming Backrooms movie, the movie is being directed by Kane Parsons, or Kane Pixels as he's known online. Kane will most likely be adapting a different version of the Backrooms, one that branches off from the internet forum versions. And that's because Kane Parsons created and directed this version of the Backrooms himself right here on YouTube. That's right, he's getting the chance to take his small budget YouTube series and adapt it into a full-blown motion picture. See what I mean about small creators getting a chance to stretch their creative wings? At 16 years old, Kane had seen the images and lore of the Backrooms and had the idea to create a video using a mix of traditional footage he recorded himself, as well as digitally creating the backroom scenes with Blender and Adobe. The video, titled Found Footage Number 1, shows a group of friends in 1996 making a movie when the cameraman trips and falls, no clipping through the concrete floor, and winding up in the backrooms. These backrooms are a little different, however, as black gooey stick-like figures known as life forms scream and wander the yellow hallways, and the damp yellow office isn't set as an endless level, but more as a section of a set within the backrooms. Eventually the protagonist is able to find a hole in the floor and end up roaming more strange areas throughout the facility, before finding a door marked fire escape and heading up some stairs to take him right back to the yellow office space. He's pursued by the life form again and attacked, dropping the camera he's been recording with as it clips back into 1996 reality and falling several hundred feet in the air till it hits the ground. The video was a hit online, gaining millions of views in less than a month, and with that, this new version of the Backrooms was born. From there, Kane went on to make 23 more videos, turning it into a series, setting up a whole new backstory of how the Backrooms came to open up in our dimension, and it all starts with a company named Async. The company had been experimenting with creating infinite space in the hopes of solving future housing and storage shortages. It wasn't until their sixth attempt, however, on October 17, 1989, that the company would find success. Async would successfully open a gateway to the backrooms. However, in doing so, the amount of power generated from the low-proximity magnetic distortion system used to create the gateway also caused the real-life 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. We then see real-world news reports of the earthquake in one video, as well as dozens of missing persons posters in another, with a graph showing a sharp increase of people disappearing almost immediately after the opening of the gateway, implying that they've all wound up in the backrooms. As Async continues its exploration through the backrooms, they come across the body of a human male, covered in what looks to be dark mold of some kind. Later, an autopsy is performed on the body and it's discovered that the mold growth is a form of Bacillus subtilis, or hay bacillus, a type of bacteria that can be found in soil and also the stomach of certain animals. On February 29, 1990, we watch a group of scientists explore the backrooms. As they go deeper, one scientist named Peter Tench gets separated from his group while following the sound of a crowd of people off in the distance. He almost makes it back to his group. With them in sight, they vanish right in front of his eyes. Now lost and alone, Peter makes his way to a small dark room. In it, he finds things like wooden wheelbarrows, a splitting maw, and what looks like a flat face of a house. Eventually, Peter is able to make his way back to the gateway, but things look a little different as sirens blare all around him. With Async now able to control the gateway, they begin exploring and documenting the backrooms, setting up cameras, microphones, and motion detectors. The next two short videos show instances of motion detectors being set off as scientists go about their normal routines. After that, we see testing footage at Oak Ridge National Laboratory as they work on a prototype low-proximity magnet distortion system in 1982. Pitfalls is the 11th video, and at 14 minutes long, it's the second longest in the series and is one of my favorites. A group of scientists exploring the backrooms come across a room filled with square pitfalls, later dubbed Room 14D. Marvin E. Lee, the camera operator of the group, falls down one of the chutes and into a room with slightly different colored wallpaper. As he looks for a way to escape, he hears a faint call for help and explores the surroundings. He's led to an area that looks like a normal-looking street with houses, trees, and starry skies. Just love the idea that this area makes no sense and the empty loneliness of the houses and streets. Also the idea that this is outside, that you can see the night sky, and yet it still feels closed off like it's a set. I just love everything about this area. The scientist Marvin continues to follow the cries for help, where he's led to a small house that's bigger on the inside than it is the outside. As he makes his way through the maze-like hallways, he finds an area that looks as if it's been lived in. He ventures a little further till he comes across a life form that's been mimicking the cries of a human. Fearing for his life, Marvin makes his way back to the shafts where he fell and is rescued by his colleagues. Async higher-ups review the footage from Marvin and seal off the sections of the backrooms leading to Room 14D. Continuing on, in one of the shorter clips coming in at just 34 seconds, we see highway footage of a car disappearing into the road. It's short and simple, but it's really all you need just to understand that no clipping is very unstable and can happen at any time, anywhere. On May 8, 1990, at the facility while meeting with the Department of Energy about a proposed plan to commercialize the backrooms, the meeting is interrupted by the sound of sirens blaring. Peter Tench has returned from the backrooms, seemingly have jumped through time a few months, however. We'll check back in with him again later. The next video we see is a hidden short coming in at 1 minute and 9 seconds, simply titled Simpsons. The short shows a clip from the episode Bart Gets Hit by a Car, which aired January 10, 1991. As the clip plays, the picture suddenly warps and cuts to a real-world Spanish-language commercial for a cold and flu medication called Dimacol for several seconds before cutting back to the clip of The Simpsons. This is significant because the specific commercial for Dimacol didn't air until the 2000s, suggesting Async's tampering with opening the gateway to the backrooms caused more harm to our reality than we know of. Now, portions of time are beginning to distort. In found footage number 2, a woman is inspecting an anomaly in her garage when she accidentally falls into the backrooms. Just like in found footage number 1, she explores and documents all the weird things she comes across while trying to make sense of it all and find a way out. She comes across uneven architecture, ill-shaped furniture, and a wrecked car that's phased into the back rooms. My first thought was that this was the car that we've seen phase out of the highway in a previous video, but this has since been debunked by Kane Parson himself. As she continues on, she comes across a home-like area. Once inside, she follows a trail of blood to a room with plant-like growth and a painting of what appears to be a woman. She soon realizes that some of the plant growth is actually a life form that begins chasing her through the back rooms. Eventually she's cornered when suddenly the room begins to glow with bright green veins before the signal goes out. From here, we see the found footage was being played on a CRT TV in what looks to be a mysterious living room. Next up, we see multiple clips of what look to be old home movies and pictures with some blacked out faces. As the last photo is shown, the attention is slowly pulled toward a painting in the background. The painting looks similar to the one that the woman seen in the overgrowth room. In the video titled Reunion, we see on May 25th, 1990, Async has reopened main access to room 14D, covering the pits with walkways, rendering them inaccessible. Meanwhile, 3 researchers, Mark Bloom, Randall Tachi, and Marvin Lee, armed with a shotgun, inspect room 14C, an area that seems more spacious but mostly unlit. As they venture through the dark rooms, they are ambushed by an unknown assailant, taking the shotgun and holding them at gunpoint. After a moment of confusion, Marvin recognizes the man to be Peter Tench. Peter reveals that Async has faked his death, letting his colleagues and family all believe he died in the back rooms instead of traveling months into the future. While Peter laments his situation, Mark requests backup from the other teams. This snaps Peter out of his emotional state as he shoots Mark, ending the clip. Picking up right after the shooting, we see footage of Peter Tench fleeing the facility. The very next day, Async has a meeting to disclose the information about what has happened to Peter. They show the footage of him and his team entering the back rooms in February, along with Peter getting separated and transported through time. Async says when Peter came back from the back rooms, they already pronounced him dead, and they disclosed this information with him once he returned. Async apparently tried to work with him to reintegrate him back to his normal life. He seemed mostly normal, but had shown signs of mental declination, akin to paranoid schizophrenia. Eventually, his failing mental state caused him to sneak back into the back rooms, where he stayed until found by Team A in the previous video. After the shooting, it was said he fled off the premises but didn't manage to get far as he tripped in a shallow ditch, causing him to bash his head on a rock and die. In the clip, we see a peaceful night sky as meters on a machine begin to rise. A glowing light emits mysteriously on screen as an overload indicator blinks on. The camera then slowly zooms on a document signed by Ivan Beck as the room begins to glow green, while the same calm night sky we saw at the beginning of the video is now being warped. For those of you wondering who Ivan Beck is, he is the vice director of Async and is basically the one who came up with the program that opened the gateway to the back rooms. Kane Parsons has stated that Ivan is essentially the protagonist of the story, although he uses the term loosely. Kane also says that Ivan is the antagonist as well, which to me makes way more sense. In the video titled Lighting and Tile Survey, we see a team of scientists checking the ceilings and lighting of the back rooms, noting the lack of dust and wear on them even with constant use. We then cut to an audio log of Dr. Julia Meisner breaking down what they've been able to figure out about the lighting and ceiling. She notes that the ceiling tiles are standard for what you'd find in a regular office, save for the dimensions being a bit off. With the lighting, she finds that everything is similar as well. Nothing out of the ordinary except maybe the troffer and bulbs. The troffers, however, do have information stamped on them indicating they were manufactured in 1973 in Reading, Pennsylvania. While the electrical ballasts have manufacturer stamp dating back to 1975, the light bulbs, although being made by Sylvania in the USA, have no manufacturing date marked. In found footage number 3, a man named Ravi is investigating noises coming from the basement of his home, only to drop to the floor and plunge into the endless labyrinth of the back rooms. He spends agonizing hours navigating the sterile fluorescent corridors until stumbling into a dark, disheveled room. There he comes across a mysterious, unseen creature that begins chasing him. Ravi runs onto a high skywalk that overlooks a massive crimson-lit city buried deep within the complex. Ducking back into the halls, Ravi picks up rhythmic chatter on a radio transmitter and calls out for help. Instead of rescue, however, his signal attracts a gaunt humanoid entity that charges him at impossible speeds as he barely manages to slip away. Hours later, Ravi discovers a bizarre sight, a complete suburban house sitting in the center of a cavernous room. Inside, he hears a human voice on the other side of a wall. Though they can't see each other, the stranger reluctantly agrees to break through the barrier. But as the first planks are torn away, a deafening rushing roar violently shakes the house. The man screams, and then is absolute silence as Ravi stands alone in the living room. We then cut to days later. A defeated Ravi stares directly into his dying camera lens. In a hollow voice, he starts reminiscing about a day at the park and wishing to go home.
I just want to go home. I don't like this, and you shouldn't either. What are you trying to get out of this, Marvin? We're on the same side, for God's sake.
The final video of the Backrooms series shows the async facility as voiceovers of Marvin and George discuss what happened to Peter following the shooting and his escape. Marvin, certain that Peter's death wasn't an accident, takes a couple weeks off to clear his head, leaving George in charge of operating the camera in the Backrooms now. While researching the room just beyond 14D, we see this area's architecture is a bit more peculiar than the other portions of the Backrooms, with stretched or warped wallpaper, alcoves and divots in the walls and floors, and furniture phasing through the walls and floors also. The last thing we see is a chair on top of a mound in the middle of the room before the video abruptly ends. And that is the story of Kane Parson's Backrooms series. In researching this video, I didn't think I'd love the story so much. The Backrooms have always been an interesting idea, but I knew almost nothing else about the lore. And as I watched the videos, as they slowly began to fill in the blanks, I realized I was now watching the series not out of the interest of making this video, but out of pure interest in the fascinating world that Kane had opened up to us. The clues and the amount of information Kane drops into each video almost always seems to be the exact amount to keep me hooked. It's really the mark of a talented and gifted storyteller. Sure, the idea that a 16-year-old kid made a great horror video on YouTube all by himself with nothing more than a camera and a computer is a great selling point, but that can only go so far. That's not going to get you long-term success. No, success and opportunities like this are earned from hard work and real genuine talent. Talent that was crafted right here on the internet. And as I said at the beginning of this video, Hollywood is now starting to recognize that talent. Now we just have to wait to experience the full story. And seeing as this is not a continuation of Kane's Backrooms series, but still set in that universe, I think it's safe to say he should feel right at home making this movie. Only time will tell though.